with Tom Brander from Lehman Brothers. Tom, you were just on a panel with me talking about capacity planning. What for you are some of sort of the main issues around capacity planning at the moment?
Actually, with capacity planning, so many things came up at the panel, which was very interesting about all of the different aspects we look at capacity. But I feel to a certain extent we're scratching the surface, because with the current nature of what's happening with the economy, a lot of companies, large companies, which had plans for building out new data centers and therefore achieving the capacity that they're lacking today, a lot of them have been shut down from this and now have to find other and better creative ways of supporting the business needs, which is typically continuing to grow. And we did key off a couple of times on what we could do with what we refer to sometimes as reserve capacity and the capability to use more of what you have. And one of the things I started looking at recently, as well as in the past couple of years, is how do we utilize some of the reserve capacity on the two-end sites that we have typically put in place for the business for highly resilient and redundant applications. We've deployed these in multiple data centers, many times at a 2N or a 2 times N+1 capability. And when you look at it, in effect, we're providing a 4 times recovery capability for that particular device and that particular application. With our DR capability where it exists today, which is typically fairly robust, there's no reason why we can't be starting to cut back on some of these highly robust data centers, going more into a N+ configuration on either side. And on the application level, it would still be looked at as an N+N or a 2N type environment, meaning that if one side goes down totally and complete, the application will continue to run on the other side.
In your impression, are many firms sort of building out their data center footprints at the moment, or is it more a case of doing more with what you currently have?
Right now, I don't think there's a whole lot of companies at all building out the new, and many of the ones that were starting to build out the new have probably stalled to a certain extent as they look to conserve their capital. So many companies are being forced to look back in and to see how they could make better utilization of their existing facilities and what they have today. And they might be doing it via virtualization or consolidation or retirement of old machines, or utilizing development UAT environments for specific applications and creating more of a pool for that UAT and dev environment, and therefore using the additional hardware for new businesses that will not require them to put additional KW load into the data center.
To what extent can disaster recovery sites be used to provide additional short-term capacity?
Disaster recovery sites, many times in the financial industry, is not really a disaster recovery site. Many times it's a dual site scenario, and that's what people go into. But the same thing as I stated with utilizing the end capacity of one location and the end capacity of the other location as your 2N, because your DR works, this now gives you typically the capability, providing, of course, the cooling and utility power and every other resources available at that location, allows you to go over your normal KW limits for your UPS.
Okay, very interesting. And one question came from the audience about container data centers. What are your feelings about those?
Okay, actually, when I left the room when that question came up, I wasn't leaving on the protest. But containers, I feel, going forward, there are certain companies that easily utilize them. Google, some web facility, but not typically the financial institutions I work for. I will say that going forward in the future, people will probably start to look at that as a fairly easy pick up and move type environment of what they can put in place. There just are some challenges that they will have to overcome, and that's typically where people have the flavor of the month type box they want to use, that they want to buy a container from one vendor, when next week or next month they might decide that another vendor's product offers more for them. The other thing that would have to go along with the containers is the classic design of data centers doesn't really fit well with a container. A container should be picked up and moved into a warehouse somewhere without a raised floor, without all of that environment that you typically have with a data center, and it should be tied into some sort of UPS that sits outside the building that doesn't require cooling, and maybe it will be a Delta redundant type UPS that would be fine for supporting an N-type environment and an N container.
The processor manufacturers, Intel and AMD, have both recently brought out sort of their latest high-end, high-performance, low-wattage processor chips. How soon do you think we're going to start to see those, being used in sort of financial services data centers, and how big an advantage are they going to bring?
It's going to be to me, in my experience, it's going to be a big savings for us short term. Okay, because we've leapfrogged over the years from many different technologies, where we've gone from TTL technology to ECL technology, which required typically a lot more power, but it also had a lot more processing power. And then we had mainframe environments that became CMOS environments, and therefore we had this great processing, but with a small amount of power and cooling required for those items. But eventually, people just keep on putting in more equipment. So eventually, that load will continue to rise after the one little dip that we see going down with the new technology.
Do you think that dip will be significant enough to be compelling in this current environment, or will people hold off from investing in them?
I believe everybody will be looking at some of the newer technology as the way to go, because that's going to be the way that they'll be able to capacity manage better. They'll get more capability in a data center because they'll do technology refreshes with the newer technology that doesn't require as much cooling and power.
And how much of an appetite is there for that kind of refresh in the current economy?
Years ago, there was probably a whole lot of appetite with it. Right now, I would assume that it'll probably be sold based on, they would have to forecast out how much they're going to save over a period of time, and basically, our break-even point is 3 years down the road or 4 years down the road or whatever it may be, and that's probably how they'd have to sell it now.
Okay. All right, Tom Brenner, thank you very much for your time. It was very interesting.